Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to be assembling, using some conversion parts. We're going to be using the accessory weapon sprue from Warlord Games and the sprue of American paratroopers. And we're going to be converting a sniper using the Springfield. We're going to be using, okay, now I'm going to take this BAR arm from the paratroopers, and I'm going to be also taking the M1 Garand arm, and we'll be using those to convert the Springfield sniper rifle and the bazooka. So this arm here, you're going to have to cut off the rifle right above where the hand grips the stock. And now I consider just going ahead and trimming off the sling, but I figured, if I leave the sling, it'll give additional support to the Springfield sniper rifle when I put it in his arms. Alright, so I'm doing a little trimming here, and I noticed I needed to trim because the first cut there was a little bit of flash left over. I'm trying to figure out exactly where the rifle pairs up with it, and then I have to cut the rifle right where the hand would also be holding the rifle. So then we test it to see if it fits right, and make sure the sling would actually rest properly. Apply some glue, and I'm using the DAP Quick Fuse, which only takes like 15 seconds to cure, and then it takes about 30 minutes to fully cure. But 15 seconds is pretty good. I can just hold it for a few seconds and then set it off to the side. And you can see you might not be able to see, but I got the sling mounted, the rifle in the hand, and the stock is still the M1 Garand stock, but that's fine. I'm getting all the bodies out that I'm planning on using. I'm going to use the prone body for the sniper rifle. I'm going to use the kneeling body for the bazooka. And I'm going to use the standing, kind of the squatting body as the loader. Now the BAR, I'm going to have to cut the BAR off because I'm going to replace it with the bazooka. Basically doing the same thing. Cutting the BAR off above the hand, and the BAR has some material along the top of the forearm. You got to cut that off, and it's a little bit of model trimming right here. Once that gets trimmed, it's basically just a guy with his hand, his elbow bent and his hand forward. And now I can take the bazooka, and it won't fit in there exactly perfectly. The stock that's underneath the bazooka goes back too far. You can glue it where it's resting on top of his shoulder or something like that, but I wanted it to be flush with the shoulder, so I'm going to have to cut this stock a little bit so that I can get it to rest under his arm. It's going to look like the stock is actually tucked up underneath his elbow. I have to cut the pistol grip off because that's where the hand would glue to the bazooka. Now, if you just take a bazooka and like glue it to somebody's back or something like that, you don't need to do any trimming at all. You can just leave it like that. But since I'm putting it in his hand, I had to find an appropriate hand, which I used the BAR, and then I make sure I piece it together. And you want to, when you cut, you're going to want to cut the least amount off at a time. And then if it's not enough, cut a little bit more. And then cut a little bit more, and then cut a little bit more until you finally get it to the right size. Don't immediately just cut too much off, because you can't go back once you cut too much off. Now you'll notice these fender washers in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. I'm not using the plastic Warlord models bases. I'm actually using metal fender washers for their bases. The main reason why I'm doing that is for the additional weight that it will provide. It'll stabilize the model on the battlefield. And what is this on my wrist? I've got some kind of little metal plastic flake there. I don't know what that is. Something I didn't notice when I filmed this. I'm sorry that I didn't capture everything on camera because I had this zoomed in quite a bit so that you could see what I was doing up close, but then I inadvertently would be working like off camera because the tripod was just to the right. All right, so now we take our DAP glue and we go ahead and glue it on to the I'm applying glue to the bazooka here, but we're going to go ahead and glue that onto the arm, the BAR right arm. Now I've seen some people put the bazooka in the prone position, and they would use the machine gun arm, and that is perfectly fine as well if you want your bazooka man to be laying prone, but I didn't. I wanted him to be kneeling, and I wanted my sniper to be laying prone, so I used the prone body for my sniper. So you just have to make some adjustments to which arms you're using. And after a few seconds, the rapid fuse should be good enough to sit down. Now I'm doing these models as part of my market garden project, but it's also just to flesh out my US Airborne bolt action army that I have. I've got about 1,000 points, and with these few models I'll be able to flesh out my Pathfinders, and I'll be able to flesh out my Bazooka Man and my sniper. I already have a sniper spotter, but I didn't have anybody with a sniper rifle. I also didn't have anybody with a bazooka, and that is why I started this little project here by ordering the US Paratrooper weapon sprue. The only thing I needed was a sniper rifle and a bazooka, but it does come with a few other weapons as well. That maybe later down the line I'll be able to give people, put on battlefields, glue them onto vehicles, who knows what. Okay, now when I had put this together, there was a little gap that formed between the hand and the bazooka, so I applied a little bit of the DAP glue in there as a gap to fill the gap like putty, and that way when it dries and I paint it, it'll be like it never was there. It'll be just a shadow. Okay, now this is a hand, an open hand, left hand. It's a palm hand, and I'm putting this on the squatting, crouching guy. What is he? He's kind of just hunched over, and he's going to be holding a bazooka shell in his hand. I didn't want him holding it up high because remember the bazooka man is going to be kneeling. So he's going to be holding this bazooka round low. Not too low, but just kind of at a casual, at rest kind of angle. You can see it's kind of low, but not too low. And then I'm going to put the bazooka round right there in his hand. I'm just kind of testing to see exactly how I want to put the bazooka in his hand. And then apply some glue and plop that rocket in there. That rocket does come with the weapon sprue. And again, after just a few seconds, it's in there. You have a couple of seconds to position it, but after about 10-15 seconds, it's locked in. Yep, holding bazooka shell in his hand. And you can see right next to him is his bazooka round bag. That bag's going to be at his feet on the base. Okay, so now we're taking the kneeling guy. We're going to attach that arm that we created with the bazooka, and we're going to put that on his body. Now I'm not putting it in a launching position. I'm putting it at kind of a casual, at rest. He's kind of pointing it 45 degrees down, just kind of relaxing. And then on the opposite side, I was going to take an arm that is a pointing arm. On the Airborne sprue, it comes with a few extra hands, and one of them where it's his left hand and he's pointing. And so I'm going to decide to do that, like he's notifying his gunner, hey, here comes a tank, or hey, let's maneuver over to there, or hey, look at those guys being silly over there. Yeah, so that's what I want to do. I wanted to kind of relax the bazooka and have a pointed hand. Give the guy a little animation. Okay, now on the guy that's laying, I don't want his legs to be straight. You get an alternative leg that lays straight. I want my leg to be cocked. I want it to be bent. What that does in real life, when you bend your right leg, it lifts up your right shoulder. So when you bend your right leg while you're laying prone, your right shoulder comes up off the ground. And I wanted that for my sniper. I wanted him to be looking over something or elevated up over something. So I went with a bent leg. Now this is a M1 Garand and a cradle. He's got it's his hand and his elbow. His elbow's resting up against his M1 Garand. That is one of the arms available on the sprue. I'm going to give that to my loader because he's got the rocket shell in one hand, and then he's got his Garand, not actively like running around shooting with it, just carrying it. I could have put one on a sling or something like that, but I figured he's more in a combat position where he's not, it's like 50-50. He's not running with it. He's just standing there. He's got his rifle under his elbow. And then he's got the rocket in his left hand. All right, now the sniper, putting the rifle on the sniper was a little bit more tricky. Because he is laying prone and he does have that body lifted up a little bit, I was using, remember, the rifle arm that I had to put the Springfield on. And when I glued it on, his elbow wasn't touching the ground. That's okay, because I was planning on putting the elbow up on something like gravel or rock or a little hill with putty or something like that. I hadn't decided, but I knew that I was going to have it lifted. And then what did I do? because the hand on the left hand wouldn't fit into the rifle with the sling the way it was, I just went ahead and just cut off the sling. I said, screw it, I'm going to cut off the sling, and I'm going to trim the sprue, trim the extra flash and burrs off of here from where the sling was. So that was a lesson learned by me. Don't need the sling. The sling was just in the way. Just testing to see where the arm fits, where it fits in the hand that I put on there. And the left hand, I'm using a bent hand. I think it was one of the Thompson arms. It was where the elbow is bent, so that when you can see it right there in a good position where he's laying prone, but that left elbow is resting on the ground or close to the ground. Yeah, and I had to trim in the hand a little bit to get the rifle to rest inside, but I also had to trim the rifle a little bit because that was the exact spot where the sling was, and it was a little bit excessive. The plastic was sticking out. All right, so let's go ahead and take the plunge and glue it in. And there you go. You can see the right elbow is elevated off of the turf. That's okay. You'll see the end product when I get there. Letting it dry a little bit before I move on. Also, I used the board here to kind of maneuver the arm and raise the rifle a little bit, because I wanted the shot, instead of it going into the dirt, I wanted the shot to go up a little higher, like he's actually sniping somebody while laying prone. Then I put a board underneath to kind of elevate it a little bit while it dries, but I realized that's not thick enough. It's only 0.08 millimeters. That's a Litco base, so I think I went ahead and grabbed a fender washer, put it under his elbow just to make it elevate a little bit more. Okay, now this is after I went out and sprayed it with the Satin Italian Olive. The Satin Italian Olive is the late war military airborne color. You don't have to modify it at all. You can just go with and I used it as a primer and the base coat. And then now we're going to do some medium flesh. Medium flesh is a good dark, rustic, dirty flesh. It's not light like elven, it's more like dwarven. You know, it's a dark flesh, and it's good for World War II soldiers because they're going to get dirty in the grass and stuff like that. And that's a Vallejo model color. Got some on my finger. I didn't know where it came from. I was like, what the heck? Okay, now I considered not painting their hands flesh and just painting their faces flesh, because paratroopers were issued gloves. So paratroopers had these deerskin gloves, which I actually have a pair of, and it's very light tan, and I could have went back and repainted these guys light tan, but again, I'm using these for how often would they wear those gloves? Usually only during the jump, and then after the jump they would take them off, or if they were doing rappelling or something like that, they would have their gloves on. But 9 out of 10 times they wouldn't have their gloves on, so I said, let's not worry about it. These guys aren't immediately after a jump. Let's just paint their flesh. So I decided to paint their hands, their face, flesh color. And I'm not putting a lot of detail onto this. I mean, you can notice that I'm just basically covering the hands and the face. I'm going to rely on some washes at the end, or one wash specifically, to handle a lot of the highlighting and detailing for me. Simple enough. You'll also notice that I've got these 3 other models off to the bottom right hand corner. Now these 3 other models are all Thompsons, and they're all soft caps. Well, actually one of them has the cunt cap on, and garrison cap, and the other 2 have the mohawks, the shaved heads, and those guys are going to be included in my Pathfinder squad, which is only 6 men. The Pathfinder squad has 1 Thompson, well, 2, I'm sorry, in the Market Garden campaign, the Pathfinder squads have 2 men with Thompsons and 4 men with rifles. These are going to be included in 3 squads to make those squads Pathfinder squads, because there's a couple of scenarios in the game that is all Pathfinders. So basically they're just going to be, and I can use them as NCOs later down the road, or just include an extra Thompson in a rifle squad, because you can do that. Now, I don't know if you've been noticing, when I'm painting, I'm using a giant brush. This brush is a 2, not a 2.0, a 2. I found that the bigger the brush, the more paint you can transfer to the model in less trips to the paint tub. And I've learned to love this Army Painter wash. It's going to fix any of my mistakes. And plus, another thing, World War II models are very forgiving, because everything's camouflaged or dirty or dark greens and tans and browns. So it's very forgiving on what colors go where, and I could probably paint flesh all over the guy's body and it would just come across as camouflage. Okay, now this is Saddle Brown. Saddle Brown is what I'm using for their boots. There is a leather brown, and there's also a wood brown that I considered for their boots, because those are all very similar colors. But I actually have a pair of brown Cochrane jump boots, and I compared it to my Vallejo paints to come up with the closest likeness to it, and it looked like it was saddle brown to me. And I also understand that when you're painting, your colors are going to be changed a little bit. They're going to be darkened a little bit depending on which wash you use. And I tend to use the strong tone on my World War II models. So the strong tone will bring this brown down. Okay. We're just painting the boots, only the brown leather boots. Okay, so we finished the loader. Now we're going to go ahead and do the Bazooka Man. Now I have a Vallejo khaki sitting right there on my paper towel. And I also have a Army Painter. No, it's not. It's not Army Painter. It's the Warlord. It's the Warlord Games khaki webbing. And when you put the two next to each other, they're not the same color. The Warlord khaki webbing is very tan, closer to white. It's not white, but it's just very tan. Where you notice this Vallejo khaki webbing is actually got kind of a green hint in it, as you can see on the paper towel right there. It's got kind of a kind of not a brown, but kind of a green part to this khaki. I don't know if it was a mismatched batch or what, but it's a perfect color. And we're finishing up on the sniper with his brown boots. And then we go on to the khaki that I was talking about, and we are going to paint every bag. So his butt pack, which I'm painting right there, his musette bag, which is his backpack. It's technically not a backpack, it's just a bag with shoulder straps. So it is a musette bag. We're going to paint that. We're going to paint any ammo pouches, his belt, basically any of his personal equipment straps, his entrenching tool cover. We're going to paint that with the khaki. Now I used the Warlord Games khaki webbing on my anti-tank gun crew, and it came out looking really good. It just didn't have the feel that I wanted it to have. It just wasn't dark enough. So I'm using the Vallejo khaki. Looking around, seeing if I can find any more straps or anything. Yeah, looks good. Go ahead and get the loader. Loader has the same thing. Basically, these airborne troops are all oh, I forgot. There is a butt pack, which he's painting there. You've got the entrenching tool cover, the musette bag, but you also have a canteen cover. Some of these guys are carrying canteens. I think all of them, most of them. And the canteen cover is also khaki. Got to get under the bag, you never know. Now, some of these guys have like cartridge ammo pouches around their belt. They also have this hidden belt that you can barely see going around their waist. I was touching that up as well. And then I noticed there was a couple of up and down shoulder straps that these guys had. Got to touch that. Those are from the musette bag. We're going to call this an LBE, or a load bearing equipment. That's what all the straps are. Now, this bag is the Bazooka shells, and that also needs to be khaki. Basically, all the canvas, which all the LBE is canvas, is this khaki color. Now later, after washing it, if I wanted to highlight it, I could use the Warlord Games khaki because it's super light. That would be a great two-tone, three-tone with the wash highlight of any of the gear. Or if I go back and do the straps that hold the bags closed, you would do that with maybe the Warlord Games khaki because it's a really light khaki. And it'll contrast well. Okay, same thing on the sniper. Now on the sniper, I used a different set of bags. If you build any of these models, you'll notice that some of the backpacks are one piece. You'll have a musette bag, a canteen, an entrenching tool cover, a ammo pouch, all that stuff will be all one model piece. And then there's a few of them that are two pieces, where the bag, the musette bag, is a separate backpack. So you could just give it to some, yeah, I've got a little extra there. You could give it to some of your models and not others. You don't have to put a musette bag on these guys. You can have them running around without the musette bag, but it just gives a little more depth by putting those backpacks on. And not everybody has to have the butt pack or the entrenching tool, because on some of those models, those are glued on separately. And on this sniper, that's exactly what it was. It's a separate musette bag and a separate entrenching tool butt pack. But I like all my guys having all their gear with them. All right, now the next color is Bazooka Green. Surprisingly enough, guess what I'm going to paint with Bazooka Green? The Bazooka. Right? I'm going to paint that Bazooka. But I'm also going to not just paint the Bazooka with it. I'm also going to paint any hard surfaces. And the primary thing about the hard surfaces is the helmet. So helmets and bazookas are going to get the Bazooka Green, which is kind of like an olive color. Not an olive drab, it's like an olive gray. Or maybe it's an olive green, because there are multiple olives. But it was called Bazooka Green. I thought I would try it and see if it is the color I need. And it is. It's a great color for any hard surface like helmets and bazookas, and also the rocket that's being held in the hand. That's another good use of the Bazooka Green. Here we go with the helmet. Now the helmets that I chose for the guys with helmets are the ones with the netting. I wanted to use there are some other helmets that are smooth, and those are kind of cool for officers, but everybody else I wanted to have like the camo netting that was on their helmets. And so that's all the helmets that I'm using here. All right, doing the little rocket in his hand. And his helmet, and that's really the only thing you do on these other guys. Only thing to do on the sniper would be his helmet. And I was thinking maybe the scope as well, because it's a hard surface. And it would be green. Just making sure I'm getting the entire scope, front and back, his helmet. I was also noticing, I was looking underneath the helmet, you know, where you paint flesh and you can, where the head and the helmet meet sometimes you got to get paint up underneath there as well. All right, now I'm going to come back with Burnt Sienna, which is a folk art color. Burnt Sienna is really good for rifle stocks or any wood that you want really dark brown. And so I'm going to put it on the entrenching tool handle. It's going to be a burnt sienna. Also, he'll probably have a rifle stock and a rifle foregrip that needs to be a wood color. So I'm going to put burnt sienna on that as well. I like burnt sienna for wood because it's not red, it's not brown, it's not, it has like a lively color to it. When you go shopping for paint, stop in at your local hobby shop or like a Hobby Lobby or a Michael's or something like that. Check out their folk art line and look at the burnt sienna color and see what I'm talking about. It's probably one of my favorite colors. Well, I do a lot of fantasy as well as World War II, so I do paint a lot of wood, you know. Is it great for like bows? It can be. I tend to use a lot lighter color for like longbows. But crossbows, yeah, great. You know, axe handles, absolutely. Entrenching tool handles, definitely. At the end of this video, I'm going to do a kind of a close-up look at some of these models, and I want you to be able to see that color and what I did here with this sniper. Notice his right elbow is elevated off of the base, but at the end, take a look and see exactly what I did with him. Okay, now this is a Springfield and not a Garand, so there's a little bit more wood on the body of the rifle, so I'm making sure that I get the stock and the body of the rifle. All right, now the next color we're going to use is Vallejo Gunmetal Gray. Gunmetal Gray is a metallic color, but it's super dark. It's almost black. It's, think of a rifle that has been blued. If you're familiar with the technique of bluing a rifle, all military rifles are blued. What that basically means is there's a chemical that's put on top of the metal of the military rifles to prevent rust, but it also takes the shine off of it and makes it more subdued. It's not actual, it is a blue color, or it's called bluing, but it's more like, honestly, it's more like black. So they should be calling it blacking, but they don't. So I use Gunmetal Gray, which it's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the gunmetal color, so it's actually a perfect color for rifles and any military guns. So any of the metal exposed components of the rifle, I use Gunmetal Gray. Now you might notice on this gunmetal gray, I'm using a finer tip brush. My 2 brush is laying there on the paper towel. The brush I'm using now is actually a fairly fine tip. I think it's a 2.0. And a 2.0, because some of the rifle metal is so thin, I wanted to make sure that I didn't get it all over the wood that I had already painted on the rifles. All right, now here's some close-ups before I go into texturing the bases. This is the Bazooka Man. Before I do the wash, this is just as we're at before the wash happens. There's the rifle. You can see the gunmetal. You can see the burnt sienna. You can see the boots are a little bit different color than the rifles. He's got his rocket, the khaki. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get out the Army Painter wash, which I've actually become in love with. They make a very good wash. I strongly, highly, extremely recommend the Strong Tone. That Strong Tone is a good wash. It's a very good wash. It's strong enough to make a difference, but not strong enough to ruin your model. Now, you notice in my paint tub there, I have put something like 15 drops of Strong Tone and about 8 drops of water, straight water. And I mix it up so what is that? It's not a 2-to-1, but just under a 2-to-1. 15 to 8. And I could have gone perfectly fine with 14 to 7, a 2-to-1 ratio of wash to water would have been perfectly fine. It's just I counted out 15 drops, and then I didn't know if I should stop at 7 or if I should go to 8, and I just went ahead and did 8. Yeah, so, and then you put it on your model fairly heavily. Make sure every part of the model is completely covered in wash, and make sure it's thick. I mean, you can see that it's puddling and pooling up in certain areas. That's okay. Just puddle it up and pool it up in the right areas, you know, between the bags and between the arms and the rifle and stuff like that. But you also want it to coat the model entirely, because the wash will actually settle down into all the cracks and crevices of the model, and it'll bring out the details. Plus, if you have a color, let's say the green transitioning to brown, or better yet, the green transitioning to your flesh, like at the cuff of your sleeve, that brown wash will, the Strong Tone, will actually rest in between your wrists and your sleeve, and it'll make it look like a shadow, or it'll make it look like you didn't make a mistake. Like if you had a little bit of an overpaint here or an underpaint there, the wash will actually bring out or disguise any errors. Now I'm just going to go ahead and wash every model that I've got out here. This is one of my Pathfinders. And for those of you that don't know anything about Mr. Everything, when I was in the 101st as a paratrooper, I was actually a paratrooper in the 101st Division. I was assigned to the Pathfinder Company. Yeah, this was back in the 80s. 83, 84, 85. I was a 101st Pathfinder. I'm kind of proud of that fact. I think that's why I am very partial to the 101st paratroopers at like Bastogne or Market Garden or D-Day. Those are the scenarios I like playing the most, but I think that's just nostalgia, or just, I think that's just, I don't know, esprit de corps, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know, I was a paratrooper myself, and I like paratrooper scenarios. It just makes me feel good about it. You know, those are the best ones. Now I know this is a topic of a different video, but I am getting some British paratroopers in as well because of Market Garden and the first para that landed at Arnhem and all that. So that'll be a project that I'll be doing pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. Okay, now this guy's got a garrison cap. He's the only one in my army that has one. So I just thought it would be cool to have a guy with a garrison cap. Most of the guys in my army are all wearing helmets, except for those 2 Pathfinders and this guy with the garrison cap. Well, okay, back to the strong tone. You can see that I'm putting it on fairly heavily. I'm just caking it on. Don't worry about it, guys. You want to make sure it covers. And you want to make sure that when it dries down into all the cracks and everything. So you want to make sure that everything is covered. If you've never used any kind of washes or any kind of glazes or anything like that before, I strongly recommend that you experiment on 1 or 2 models before you do your entire army. So if you paint your entire army, great. Then just pull like 1 or 2 models to the side, put a wash on them, and I would recommend using the strong tone. Use the strong tone and then let them dry. Don't evaluate them or see how good or how bad they are until that wash has dried. And once it's dried, then go back and look at it and say, is this the effect that I want? Is it too strong? Is it too thin? And if it's too thin, then just add a few more drops of water to your wash combination. If it's too strong, if it's too thin, don't put any more water. And if it's too strong, then just add some more water. And so kind of experiment to find out exactly what the mixture is that you like with the colors of the models that you're using to determine, what wash is best. Now they make a light tone as well. I would recommend the light tone on bright colored models, like maybe Napoleonics or something like that. But I would use the dark tone, the strong tone on World War II models like this, or I would use the dark tone on maybe some fantasy models of specific types, just depending on which kind of effect you're looking at. All right, so these guys have been washed. I'm waiting for the wash to dry, but you can see the Pathfinders on the right. You can see the Bazooka man, the crew member, and the sniper. And I've also washed, I used the remainder of the wash that was in my tub to wash the 57mm anti-tank gun. I went ahead and washed that as well, just to give it a little extra highlight of some of the details that are on that anti-tank gun. All right, now you can see that we have the fine ballast and the coarse ballast already on the bases. And now what I'm doing is I'm applying some Elmer's glue so that I can put that battlefield green grass on the models. Now when I put the ballast down, that covers 100% of the base. But then when I go to the flock or the green grass, I make sure that I put about 75% of the base covered by PVA or Elmer's glue. That way when I put the grass on, some of the dirt will shine through and it'll look like it's a three-dimensional model. So we go ahead and sprinkle this battlefield grass, and I like the Army Painter battlefield grass because it's like a sawdust. I've grown away from the what do you call it? I've become disenfranchised or disenchanted of static grass. I was using static grass for a while, but it just doesn't look lifelike. It looks too fake, too stringy. So I've been using the like Bosch grass, and I found this Army Painter grass, and it's just like the Bosch, but just has a slightly different color that I do like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go with the 3/4 Elmers on these bases. And a lot of times when I put the Elmers onto the base, I'm trying to avoid the large rocks that are also on the base. That way the grass will lay around the rocks and not cover the rocks. So that'll give, again, it'll lend itself towards that three-dimensional look. And I use a tester's brush, and then I'm just sure to wash the brush after we do the application of the Elmers. But the tester's brush has worked out really well for me for the last few years now. I don't paint with it. I don't feel like it would be a very good painting brush, but it's great for applying Elmer's glue. And I sprinkle the grass over the parts that I painted with the Elmer's glue. And I leave it. I don't shake it off. That's one thing I see other modelers doing, is they'll sprinkle their grass on and then they'll immediately shake it off. I don't do that. I leave it on for a good 15, 20, 30 minutes before I shake it off. That way the surface tension of the Elmers will be broken and it'll soak down into the Elmers. So as it dries, it's basically secured on there, and and you get a thicker grass. If you're just wanting like a super thin layer of grass over your gravel, then yeah, sure, shake it off immediately. But if you want thick grass, or if you want it to be adhered very well, then let it soak into the Elmers. Getting down in between those legs was a little bit more complicated. In the past, I've used toothpicks and things like that. But in this case, what I had thought about what I was going to do with this model, and towards the end, I was like, no, this guy's a sniper. It's all right if he's got grass on his pants. Sprinkling it pretty heavily. Trying to cover any part of the base that is shiny from the Elmer's glue. And sometimes I've done this in the past where I'll put the grass on, and if the shine starts to come through the Elmers or through the static grass, I'll actually add more grass. All right, now here's those 6 models that I did. The 3 on the right are the models that I set out to do. These other 3 were Pathfinders. Those are just kind of an afterthought. Total 6. Well, here's the guy. Take a look. That's got the wash, the paint, the spray paint, the flesh, the gun. I got a little bit of extra grass on. I must have put some glue on that by accident. Let's go ahead and scratch most of that off. If there's a little grass on the rocket, no big deal. I'm not going to cry about it. Got his bag laying at his feet, and I put a little tuft of grass between his legs and the back, to give the base even more 3 dimensions. It gives it like 4-dimensional look. All right, so let's take a look at this sniper right here, and look what I did. Okay, all the tufts, he's laying in tall grass. He's hidden. His right elbow is raised. It's going to be on some rocks. You didn't get a chance to see it there. I didn't turn him around. You'll get a chance to see him again. Look how the wash settled down into the creases of the clothing, and also the weapon, and how it really brings out the details, like the straps, bags, even the flesh. Look at the dirty face on this guy. It looks like he's got some oil on his face, or maybe he's been burned. That's awesome. And then you got the cap between the ammo cartridges, and how it brings out the detail of the straps. Same thing with this guy. Yeah. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look again at the main subject matter, the sniper. You can see the musette bag, how it's got the stains, his helmet, and then it looks like he's disappearing in the grass. See, I put some rocks underneath his arm, so his arm's up, resting, firing. Yeah, that's exactly what I was planning on doing in the very beginning. Yeah, he looks really good. I'm digging that model right there. I hope you like it. You can see the dark creases because of the strong tone. You can see his face, his mouth, his his cargo pockets on his pants. All right, now he's got a little tuft by his. The Elmer's hasn't dried on the bottom of that tuft, but because I just added it. Bazooka and his helmet look really good. The collars, yeah. All I need to do now is maybe go back and add a 101st patch on his shoulder, and leave it at that. All right, thanks for coming out and checking out this video. And if you want to see more, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you next time.